It all started back in 1971. Visionary engineer Nolan Bushnell and his partner Ted Dabney, realizing the cost of computers had come down far enough to scale, invented the first computer arcade game called Computer Space. This non-pinball, space-age attraction was a hit. Then a year later, they made history with the game that captured the zeitgeist, PONG. PONG was a rocket launch for Atari. People were lining up just to get a chance to play. Everyone knew we had something special, something that would change the world of entertainment forever. And with that, we quickly became the name in gaming. You know, you love to go back and just be the fly on the wall? Well, that's me, the fly. Anyway, then one day, Nolan thought, why stop there? Let's bring the arcade experience right into people's homes. It was simple. Just two paddles bouncing a pixel back and forth. But everyone went nuts for PONG. More than a game, PONG was a social phenomenon. It had a cool factor, and everyone had to have it. Another hit. Money was rolling in. We were more popular than Tab Cola and carpeted vans. It felt like nothing could stop us. But what did they say? Pride cometh before a crash? Well, we would crash. But first, some really cool stuff happened. It's about to get wild. As Atari grew, we needed talented people to keep the momentum going. One of our best hires was a young man named Steve Jobs. A fresh out of college, bright but somewhat headstrong engineer, Steve worked with us for a time, designing a simpler circuit board for a new game, Breakout. He brought along his friend, Steve Wozniak, to code the game. He coded it in just 4 sleepless nights. These guys were special. Little did we know how special. While the two Steves' time at Atari was short, it played a small part in shaping the future of technology forever. Steve absorbed everything about design, manufacturing, and the power of bringing innovative products to market. He learned from Nolan's creative genius and fearless invention. They left to start a little company called Apple in a garage. He even offered a generous piece to Nolan for a modest startup investment. Nolan declined. Oops. Steve and Nolan remained friends. You can see Nolan's influence in Steve. In 1977, we launched the Atari 2600. This was the console that would change home entertainment forever. Gen X kids lost their minds. For the first time, people could play games with interchangeable cartridges, bringing the arcade experience almost into their living rooms. Having it at home made up for the lower quality games. They could play all night for free. Next came game after game. Every child wanted an Atari. Every game was an immersive new experience. Everything was going perfect. Well, actually, not exactly. The 2600 was a huge hit, selling millions of units and becoming a cultural icon of the late 70s and early 80s. The gaming king for a decade. Games like Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and Asteroids went from household names to household games. Families gathered around the TV, competing for high scores and sharing in the excitement. The graphics were not much yet, but times they were a-changing. Like bell-bottoms for parachute pants. We had created something that brought people together, something that transcended generations. What I didn't mention yet was that a year before, in 1976, Nolan sold the company to Warner. A little early for VC-style financing, or he could have just raised money. Sometimes selling was the only way to raise enough capital to scale. Nolan stayed on as a board member. This brought in much-needed capital for growth, but also Warner's corporate oversight in the form of a stuffed shirt, corporate CEO. Warner record execs thought of games as records and failed to upgrade the console. Nolan became increasingly frustrated and left to launch something else he'd been working on, a joint called Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater. Combined arcade games with pizza and unnerving singing animatronic characters based on the ones he'd seen at Disneyland. So fun. The corporate culture at Warner clashed with the creative spirit that had made Atari great. Our 4 top designers were feeling stifled and undervalued, considering they were responsible for 60% of our game sales. They asked for royalties and name recognition, like any musician would get on an album. Mr. Corporate saw them as replaceable cogs in the machine and said no and get back to work. Less whining, more designing. Understanding their value, they took a bold step and left to form a little thing called Activision. This exodus of talent was a blow to Atari even if they didn't see it. Activision pioneered third-party game development and quickly became a giant in the business. They were for decades until selling to Microsoft for billions. These were the creative people who understood the magic formula, the ones who could push the boundaries of what video games could be, and competing with Atari with something to prove, pushed them to new heights. Their departure marked a turning point, that and our unwillingness to innovate. We tried the lackluster and expensive Atari 5200, but it flopped. The video game industry experienced a massive crash in 1983. Our founder and top designers were gone. Atari was mismanaged until there was nothing. The market was flooded with low-quality games putting profit over quality. Many of them rushed releases or poorly conceived, like a straight-to-video sequel. Consumers, overwhelmed and disappointed, just stopped buying. Atari, once the industry leader, was hit hard, not unlike Tab Cola. We had lost our creative spark, and our reputation suffered from a string of poorly received games, like the infamous E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which ended up in a landfill. The crash was a wake-up call for the entire industry. As Atari struggled to recover, new players emerged. Nintendo, with its focus on family-friendly games and innovative console design, took the industry by storm. Sega, too, gained popularity with its emphasis on arcade-quality experiences and edgy marketing. Then along came PlayStation, quickly gained top spot. We tried releasing Atari Jaguar, but it was too late. Xbox came along to spar with PlayStation, and Nintendo went a more creative route to stay relevant with its Cube, Wii, and Switch. The gaming landscape had changed, and Atari, once the undisputed king, was now not even in the race. Despite our efforts to adapt and innovate, Atari never regained its former glory. The brand was eventually bought by GT Entertainment, the Doom guys. Activision went on to develop a long list of games starting with Pitfall and eventually Call of Duty. Chuck E. Cheese eventually fell apart and was sold, but its legacy can still be seen in places like Dave & Buster's. While Atari's time at the top was relatively short-lived, its impact on the world of entertainment is undeniable. We helped create a multi-billion-dollar industry, one that continues to thrive and evolve today. Gaming is bigger than movies, bigger than television. It's made a lot of people famous online and spawned esports. We showed the world the power of home video games and their ability to entertain, challenge, and bring people together, starting with PONG. And Nolan? He's out there reinventing education now. He's the godfather of all of this, a legend. Even today, the Atari name evokes a sense of nostalgia, a reminder of those early days when video games were new and exciting. We're still here after finding a niche for nostalgia audiences by releasing nostalgia games and mini consoles. Atari is a fond memory in the minds of Gen X kids, now grandparents. Its former employees, one way or the other, have gone on to do great things. The story of Atari is a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most successful companies can falter if they lose sight of what made them who they are. But you'll see us again, just for fun. Ask your grandparents about Atari.